Divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived, goes the tableau of Henry VIII's 6 wives. And today, on the 466th anniversary of her death, we're going to be discussing Anne of Cleves, one of the divorced ones. Now, Catherine Parr, the last wife, is the survived, but she didn't survive long. She died in childbirth very shortly after Henry VIII's death. I consider Anne of Cleves to be the great survivor, the clever one, in my opinion. She knew exactly what she was doing. She knew Henry VIII, and she knew how to survive in Henry VIII's world and mind. So, firstly, join me in Westminster Abbey at the tomb of Anne of Cleves, and then from there afterwards we'll zip back in time and start right from her birth up to her life and then death and burial in Westminster Abbey. So, join me in the Abbey now.
Afternoon, ladies and gents, and what we're looking at here is something rather interesting. It's the tomb of Anne of Cleves, wife of Henry VIII for a very short time, divorced. She could have become a laughingstock and a shamed woman, spurned by the king, but she didn't. She became known as the king's good sister, and visited court many times and enjoyed a life of privilege. Considering for our age, she died very young, at the age of 42, but back then it was fairly natural and she may have died of cancer. But yeah, she was very close to Elizabeth and Mary, and died in the reign of Queen Mary, aka Bloody Mary. And Mary had her body brought down to Westminster and had this fine tomb created for her, which bear the arms of England and the arms of Cleves, as well as other heraldic devices and patterns. And bearing in mind that Anne died in a Catholic reign, this looks very much like an altar, but it is a tomb. A very large and impressive tomb, and she was given a very prestigious place, buried among the kings, because just behind here is the shrine to St Edward the Confessor, and all around that way, in the horseshoe shape, are the tombs of kings. So she's buried here in a real place of honour, which shows how well thought of she was. This is what we can see of the front part of her tomb, which is splendid enough, of course, but there is another part to it that you can get closer to, and that's behind here. So join me there and I will show you that now. And here we are, in the back bit, the tomb of Anne of Cleves, Queen of England, born 1515 and died in 1557. This is a much later edition, was put here, the name. Basically so people could see who is buried where, because we can't get to where her tomb is round there. It's a very sacred area across the Cosmati pavement, and not many people are allowed to walk on that. So yeah, this is the tomb of Anne of Cleves, a very interesting woman who led a fairly sad life at the first, but she came to her own in England, and I like a story of bad made good. So yeah, that's Anne of Cleves, and we'll delve off a little more into her life. I hope you're all going to find this interesting. So, take care, and hope you're going to enjoy the rest of the video. And if I don't say thank you and hope you enjoyed it at the end, thank you and hope you enjoyed it.
And now let us step back in time to September 1515 and the city palace of Dusseldorf in the Duchy of Berg, the Holy Roman Empire, where the life of this interesting lady all began. So off we go, and then we shall discuss her birth, her life and story from there. Anne was born on the 22nd of September 1515 in the city palace of Dusseldorf in the Duchy of Berg in the Holy Roman Empire. And this is the image that you can see here. Principal seat of the Duke of Cleves, city palace, and it's circled off, and this is the city as Anne would have known and recognised it. But better than that, we get to see inside the place of Anne's birth and where she would have spent much of her early childhood and early adulthood. Schlossberg, the Rittensaal, main public chamber of the castle, similar function to an English Great Hall, like the one in Hampton Court, where all the daily life of everything would have taken place in here. Rich and poor would have rubbed shoulders, and Anne, her parents, sisters and brother and their court would have spent much of their time in this place. And as you can see, it's a very beautiful location. She was the second daughter of John III of the House of Lamarck. Now, he had a massively long title, but is most often referred to as the Duke of Cleves. Born 1490, died in 1539. And his wife Maria, Duchess of Jülichberg, born 1491, died in 1543. She grew up in Schlossberg on the edge of Solingen. Anne's father was influenced by Erasmus and followed a moderate path within the Reformation. He decided to side with the Schmalkaldic League and opposed Emperor Charles V. After John's death, Anne's brother William became the Duke of Jülich-Cleves-Berg, bearing the promising epitaph of the rich. This is him here. In 1526, the eldest sister, Sibylla, or Sibylle, was married to John Frederick, Elector of Saxony. This is Anne's eldest sister. To John Frederick, Elector of Saxony, head of the Protestant Confederation of Germany and considered the champion of the Reformation. Not much is known about Anne before 1527, when she became betrothed to Francis, Duke of Bar, son and heir to Antoine, Duke of Lorraine, although their marriage did not proceed. In March 1539, negotiations for Anne's marriage to King Henry VIII began, as Henry believed that he needed to form a political alliance with her brother William, who was leader of the Protestants in West Germany, to strengthen his position against attacks from the Catholic French and the Holy Roman Empire. Here we see Henry VIII, frightening and imposing figure, which some were terrified by Henry VIII with the power he had. It's hardly surprising, really, is it? But yeah, envoys were sent over to Cleves, and it was quite a funny situation, really, because when they were sent over at that time, both of the sisters were unmarried, and both were up for the grab type of thing, to potential wives for Henry VIII, lucky them. Anyway, they were brought out, and the dress of Cleves for women at the time was to literally cover them from head to toe, including their faces in thick veils. And when these envoys or ambassadors saw this, they carefully broached that they at least needed to see the girls to convey to their master what they were like. And the girl's brother, the Duke, went, "What? Would you see them naked?" But anyway, it was to and fro, and in the end, Holbein was sent over to paint this portrait. And this is an original from the time in its original case, so it's a tough old survivor, this one. And this is Anne of Cleves, as Holbein, who was known for his accuracy in painting people. This is what Anne of Cleves looked like at the approach of her marriage to Henry VIII. This little miniature portrait was sent over to Henry, and upon seeing it, he decided that he would marry Anne of Cleves. There's a nice, clearer version of it there. Anne arrived in England on the 27th of December 1539 and married Henry VIII on the 6th of January 1540. But after 6 months, the marriage was declared unconsummated as a result, and she was not crowned Queen Consort. Following the annulment, Henry gave her a generous settlement, and she was thereafter known as the King's beloved sister. Here's Henry VIII's deposition on his marriage to Anne of Cleves, which states that it was unconsummated, and he was a cheeky so-and-so Henry VIII, because he said to Cromwell that he liked her not, and he found her, or thought her to be, no maid at all, and that her breasts were saggy and she had evil smells about her person. Now I think Henry VIII might have been doing a bit of reflecting or deflecting there, because in that bed on that wedding night there was only one person that smelt and that had saggy breasts, and that was the very overweight Henry VIII with his ulcerated stinky leg that could be smelt from 3 rooms away. But there we are. And this is Anne of Cleves' divorce nullification testimony. This is her testimony. Now, Anne's great trick of survival, unlike Henry VIII's previous wives of Catherine of Aragon and Anne Boleyn, who fought Henry VIII very hard, she didn't, Anne of Cleves. When Henry VIII decided that he wanted the marriage to be ended, she went along with him entirely. She agreed. She wrote back to him and said that she obeys His Majesty's wishes, and that she wished the wedding ring to be broken in 2 as a thing of no meaning. Henry VIII liked this, and she also laid it on with a trowel that she clung to him as her protector, all this and that kind of stuff. And it was decided upon that they would divorce, and Henry VIII liked the way that she conducted herself. She played the delicate little flower, and that appealed to his macho nastiness in a way. Anyway, she got a divorce settlement, a good divorce settlement, and became known as the King's good sister. Houses and stuff were settled on her, and she did okay. So, as I say, with the divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived thing, she was divorced, but in my opinion, she was the greatest survivor, because she was bloody clever. She knew how to play the situation, and she did well out of it. This is Thomas Cromwell. That's what brought about his downfall, was the Cleves marriage. He brought about the Cleves marriage and fought hard for it. And then when Henry VIII wanted out of it and he couldn't find a way out of it, well, heads would roll in the case of Henry VIII. And here is the nullification of the marriage deed. King Henry VIII and Anne of Cleves, and this deed rendered their marriage null and void. Anne's coat of arms as Queen Consort. That's also on her tomb as well, even though she was divorced. Remaining in England, she lived to see the end of old Henry VIII, the reign of Edward VI, and the coronation and reign of Queen Mary I, also known as Bloody Mary, outliving Henry VIII and the rest of his wives. Now, Anne of Cleves had developed quite a closeness to Elizabeth and Mary, both of Henry's daughters, and that's how she fared quite well in the reign of Queen Mary. Now, bearing in mind that Anne was born a Lutheran Protestant, once again, she obviously thought back to the past, knew what Mary was like, and every inch her father's daughter, and she quite happily converted to the Roman Catholic faith and did everything that Queen Mary wanted. So she became well liked for that. On August the 4th, 1553, Anne wrote to Mary I to congratulate her on her marriage to Philip of Spain. On the 28th of September 1553, when Mary left St James's Palace for Whitehall, she was accompanied by her sister and by Anne of Cleves. Anne also took part in Mary's coronation procession and may have been present at her coronation at Westminster Abbey. These were her last public appearances. As the new queen was a strict Catholic and yet again changed religion, now becoming a Roman Catholic, as we just discussed, and why. She knew how to survive Anne of Cleves, and many people were of the mind, well, we pray to the same God, and you didn't want to be burned at the stake or put under house imprisonment in the case of someone like Anne. I don't hope they wouldn't have burned her. I mean, they killed Jane Grey, the 9 Days Queen, and she was still a child. So yeah, I mean, Anne of Cleves watched all these things going on, the Marian persecutions under Queen Mary. Anne would have seen that and thought, no thank you, I'm going to convert and be a good Catholic girl. After her arrival as the King's bride, Anne never left England. Despite occasional feelings of homesickness, Anne was generally content in England and was described by Holinshead as a lady of right commendable regards, courteous, gentle, a good housekeeper, and very bountiful to her servants. When Anne's health began to fail, Queen Mary I allowed her to live at Chelsea Old Manor, where Henry VIII's last wife, Catherine Parr, had lived after her remarriage. Here in the middle of July 1557, Anne dictated her last will and testament. In it she mentions her brother, her sister and sister-in-law, as well as the future Queen Elizabeth, the Duchess of Suffolk, the Countess of Arundel. She left some money to her servants and asked Mary and Elizabeth to employ them in their households. She was remembered by everyone who served her as a particularly generous and easygoing mistress. Anne died at Chelsea Old Manor on the 16th of July 1557. The most likely cause of her death was cancer. She was buried at Westminster Abbey on the 3rd of August in what has been described as a somewhat hard to find tomb, because it's quite tucked away and you're not really can get that close to it, but we managed it all right, didn't we? On the opposite side of Edward the Confessor's shrine and slightly above eye level for a person of average height, and I'm quite short, so I managed all right. Anne's epitaph in Westminster Abbey, which is in English, simply reads, Anne of Cleves, Queen of England, born 1515, died 1557, and that bit's on the reverse side of the tomb, and that was added much later on. So for many years there wasn't a name inscription on there, but she had a fine tomb which was made by a man of Cleves as well, so a man of her own land, and on it are the arms of England, the arms of Anne of Cleves, and she is shown as queen for her arms with skulls and crossbones. This is the funeral procession of Anne of Cleves, and as you can see, Bloody Mary, Queen Mary I, gave her a decent send-off, a very decent send-off. The length of time in between death and burial shows that she would have been lead coffined and given all the respect due to a member of the royal family in that regard. And we're seeing the procession in order as it was, with the ladies and that, the chief mourners, and then here the hearse with Anne's coffin on. In the rear of the procession. And she was buried in that fine tomb in Westminster Abbey, where she still resides today. And she is a resting royal. She hasn't been interfered with and moved around like some of our royals that I've covered before. Over time, many have been struck by how Anne had been brought up in a warm and loving household. She had been taught how to love with a generous heart. How even when rejected by a capricious husband after only 6 months of marriage, Anne's early experiences and cleverness of mind and willingness to survive allowed her to cling to a fairy tale long after it had in reality turned to dust. and actually make a bloody good success out of it. So, don't forget, the divorced, beheaded, died, divorced, beheaded, survived. She may have been divorced, but was this woman a great survivor? So on the anniversary of her death, I wanted to cover her properly, and the Westminster Abbey footage, which you saw at the beginning of the video, I've had on my phone for several months. It was on my last visit to the Abbey, and I've been keeping it for today for this specific purpose. So I hope you all enjoyed this life of Anne of Cleves. Thanks for watching, take care, and if you did enjoy it, please give it a like and a share. Thanks all, and hope you're all having a great Sunday. And remember, this great survivoress, you could learn a lesson or two by her.